Imagine waking up one day and realizing that everything you've been chasing, the approval, the success, the material wealth, the recognition, wasn't the true source of fulfillment. Instead, it was all a distraction. A carefully crafted illusion that kept you from something far more profound, something far more freeing. What if all this time, your deepest pain, your greatest fears, and the endless pursuit of happiness were rooted in a single, deceptively simple idea: attachment? Now, stop and ask yourself, why is it that the more we cling to something, whether it's a person, a goal, or a possession, the more it seems to slip through our fingers? Why is it that the very act of holding on so tightly can make us feel so empty? We've been taught to strive, to hold tight, to build and to own. In a world that relentlessly pushes us to chase more money, more love, more success, detachment seems counterintuitive, even reckless. But what if I told you that it is this very attachment, this constant yearning for control and certainty, that holds the key to everything you've ever wanted? What if the secret to mastering life itself was not in acquiring more, but in letting go? What if the paradox of life is this: the more you detach, the more deeply connected you become to everything that truly matters? The more you release, the more freedom and peace you discover. Doesn't this challenge everything you've been taught? You've been told that happiness lies in getting the things you want, that security comes from clinging to relationships and possessions, that identity is shaped by what you hold dear. Yet, every time you find yourself grasping for something, you sense it slipping away. And in the depths of that realization, the gnawing thought begins to form: maybe this isn't how life was meant to be lived. Maybe the pursuit itself is the trap. This is the great paradox we are all bound to. The more we try to control our world, the more we tighten our grip, the more it slips away from us. The more we attach ourselves to fleeting desires, the more they transform into sources of suffering. But what if this entire way of thinking, this relentless drive for more, is precisely the thing that blinds us to the true nature of freedom and peace? What if, by mastering detachment, we not only free ourselves from the suffering that comes with attachment, but we also unlock a life of profound depth and meaning? Consider this: every time you cling to an outcome, a person, or a belief, you essentially trap yourself within a box of your own making. You limit the possibilities that life can offer because you've drawn a narrow, rigid line around what you think should be. And every time life moves beyond your expectations, when your desires aren't fulfilled, when people change, or when circumstances shift, you are left with disappointment, frustration, and confusion. What if, instead of drawing those lines, you simply let go? What if you allowed life to unfold without the need to control, without the need to define, without the need to label everything that comes your way? This is the moment when detachment steps in, not as a denial of life, but as an invitation to experience it fully, without the chains of expectation and desire. Detachment isn't about giving up, it's about letting go of the things that weigh you down. It's about freeing yourself from the attachment to outcomes and the limiting beliefs that keep you stuck in a cycle of longing and dissatisfaction. So here's the question: what if the key to mastering life is not about getting more or holding tighter, but about learning the art of detachment? What if the true mastery comes from releasing the need to control, the need to possess, the need to hold on to things that are, by their very nature, transient? What would happen if you stopped clinging to outcomes and embraced the flow of life as it is, in all its uncertainty and impermanence? This, my friend, is the art of detachment. The great challenge is not in acquiring everything you want, but in learning to stand with open hands, free of attachment, ready to embrace whatever life offers, without fear, without anxiety, and with the full depth of your being. And yet, the question remains: how do you even begin to detach? How do you step away from a life built on attachment, on expectations, on the need to control? This is where the journey truly begins. Now that we've posed the paradox and the essential question, we must dive deeper. How have some of the greatest minds in history grappled with this idea? What have they learned that can illuminate the path to detachment? What does detachment truly mean for your soul, and how does it shape your reality in ways you may never have imagined? Let's explore the wisdom of the philosophers and thinkers who have walked this path before us. What if, for a moment, you allowed yourself to step into the shoes of the great philosophers who have wrestled with detachment throughout history? What if you could look through their eyes and see how this very concept shaped not only their lives, but also the entire course of human thought? Perhaps it will offer you a deeper understanding of what detachment truly means, for your soul, for your mind, and for your very being. Take the Stoics, for example. Ancient Greece's greatest minds, like Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius, didn't just talk about detachment, they lived it. For the Stoics, detachment wasn't merely an abstract concept, it was a practical, vital tool for living a life of tranquility and virtue. They taught that one's happiness, peace of mind, and freedom were not dependent on external circumstances, but on how well one could detach from those circumstances. Imagine Epictetus, once a slave, now a philosopher, sitting in a cold room, reflecting on the world around him. He could have focused on the pain of his past, the humiliation of his current status, the lack of any material wealth or security. But he didn't. Instead, he focused on what he could control: his mind, his perceptions, and his actions. Epictetus famously said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This simple yet profound idea speaks to the essence of detachment. When you detach from external circumstances, you release their grip on your happiness. The events of life become mere things that happen, and how you respond to them is entirely within your power. Seneca, a wealthy Roman statesman and philosopher, took detachment a step further in his writings, particularly in his essays on the fleeting nature of life and the inevitability of death. He warned that attachment to material wealth and status was a dangerous trap because these things were transient and ultimately beyond our control. Seneca's famous lines, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality," captured the essence of this detachment. The suffering we experience is often rooted in our attachments to things that are uncertain, out of our control, or temporary. By letting go of those attachments, we can break free from the cycle of anxiety and suffering. But perhaps the most profound Stoic on the subject of detachment was Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and philosopher. His meditations, written in solitude during military campaigns, reveal a man who understood detachment not just in theory, but in practice. He reminded himself constantly that everything, power, fame, even life itself, is temporary. "You could leave life right now," he wrote. "Let that determine what you do and say and think." Marcus Aurelius realized that true freedom came not from control or attachment, but from the acceptance of life's impermanence. In this acceptance, he found peace. Now, let's turn to Buddhism, where the idea of detachment is woven deeply into its very fabric. The Buddha's Four Noble Truths, which offer a map to end suffering, teach that attachment is the root cause of dukkha, suffering. According to Buddhism, everything in life is impermanent, and by clinging to things that are bound to change, we create suffering for ourselves. Imagine the Buddha sitting beneath the Bodhi tree, meditating in stillness. It is here that he experienced enlightenment and realized that the way to end suffering is not through acquiring or holding on to things, but by letting go of attachment altogether. He discovered that attachment to even the things we love, whether it's people, possessions, or ideas, binds us to a cycle of desire and suffering. The moment we let go of attachment, we transcend the cycle of craving and suffering. We step into a state of peace. This concept of detachment is also echoed in the Bhagavad Gita, a central text in Hindu philosophy. Here, Lord Krishna advises Arjuna, a warrior prince, to perform his duty without attachment to the fruits of his actions. You have the right to perform your prescribed duties, but you are not entitled to the fruits of your actions, Krishna tells him. The message is clear: The key to spiritual liberation, moksha, lies in doing one's duty selflessly and without attachment to the results. In essence, detachment in the Gita is not about renouncing life's pleasures, but about engaging in life fully while relinquishing the need to control outcomes. By focusing on the action itself, free from attachment to results, we can achieve inner peace. Arjuna's journey is one of internal liberation, where the act of detaching from the need for success or failure becomes the gateway to deeper spiritual freedom. The power of detachment is also seen in Taoism, where the concept of wu wei, or non-action, teaches that life flows most naturally when we release our efforts to force things into being. Taoist teachings emphasize that when you stop clinging to outcomes, when you cease striving against the currents of life, you achieve harmony with the world around you. It's in this surrender to the natural flow of things that you find true strength and peace. Lao Tzu, the great Taoist sage, famously said, "By letting it go, it will come to you." Detachment here is not about apathy, but about surrendering to the natural order, trusting that life unfolds as it should. And then there are the Christian mystics, such as Saint John of the Cross and Saint Teresa of Avila, who speak of detachment in deeply spiritual terms. For them, detachment is the key to union with God. To love God fully, they believed, one must detach from all earthly attachments, be they material, emotional, or even relational. It's in this detachment that the soul becomes free to experience divine love without the distractions of worldly desires. The Christian concept of detachment is about purifying the heart so it can be filled only with the divine, allowing one to transcend the lower attachments that keep us bound to earthly suffering. The psychological and philosophical implications of detachment are staggering. At its core, detachment is about shifting the way we relate to the world. It's not about rejecting life or abandoning relationships, but about freeing ourselves from the mental and emotional attachments that cause suffering. Attachment, in all its forms, whether it's attachment to people, things, identities, or outcomes, creates a sense of dependency. It binds us to a cycle of craving and dissatisfaction. The more we attach, the more we set ourselves up for pain when those attachments are threatened, changed, or lost. Detachment, therefore, isn't about rejecting desire, but recognizing its impermanence and not allowing it to define your happiness. It's about recognizing that what truly defines you is not what you own, not what you achieve, and not what others think of you, but your ability to remain free, present, and at peace with the ebb and flow of life. The great philosophers, mystics, and thinkers of the world were not teaching detachment because they wanted us to abandon life, they were teaching us how to truly live. They showed us that only when we release our attachments can we experience life in its full, unencumbered beauty. Only when we detach from the external world can we connect deeply with our inner selves, with the divine, and with the flow of existence itself. But what does this mean for you, in your daily life, in your relationships, in your deepest aspirations? What are the attachments that bind you? What would it mean to let them go, and what might you discover in the process? These are questions that demand exploration. And the journey of detachment is one you must take for yourself. This insight into the experiences of the greatest minds in history brings us closer to understanding the power of detachment. But there's more. We haven't yet fully grasped the psychological mechanisms that make detachment so transformative. To understand the true depth of its power, we must explore how the mind works, how our neurological patterns keep us trapped in cycles of attachment, and why letting go is one of the most radical and liberating things you can do. Let's dive deeper. Let's now explore something far deeper. If detachment is truly the key to mastering life, then we must ask, why is it so difficult to practice? Why does the mind, time and time again, fall back into attachment, even when we know it causes suffering? The answer lies not just in philosophical or spiritual teachings, but in the very architecture of the human mind. We are, at our core, creatures of habit, bound by cognitive biases, neurological wiring, and social conditioning that are designed to keep us attached to the world around us. To detach is not merely a philosophical or moral stance, it's a fundamental reprogramming of the way we interact with the world. First, let's talk about cognitive biases. These are mental shortcuts our brain uses to process information quickly, but they often lead to faulty thinking. One of the most profound cognitive biases in play here is the endowment effect, the tendency to overvalue what we own or what we have become attached to. Once something becomes ours, whether it's an object, a belief, or a relationship, we assign it greater value than it objectively holds. Our attachment inflates its perceived worth, making it harder to let go. Consider a simple example. You buy a vintage watch. It might cost more than you initially expected, but the moment it's yours, it feels like it becomes part of your identity. You begin to place a sense of value on it that far exceeds its material worth, to the point where the idea of parting with it causes real emotional discomfort. Your attachment to it isn't just about the watch, it's about how it has come to symbolize something about your status, your taste, your sense of success. This is the endowment effect in action. Your attachment distorts your perception, and the simple act of detaching becomes painful because of the mental and emotional value you've projected onto it. This effect is not just about material possessions. It extends to people, ideas, and even beliefs we hold dear. How many times have you held onto a belief about yourself, about the world, or about a person only because it became part of your identity? Letting go of it would mean rethinking who you are, what you value, and how you see the world. That's a deeply unsettling prospect for the human mind, which thrives on certainty and stability. But here's where it gets even more profound. Our attachment to these things isn't just driven by cognitive biases, it's wired into the very structure of our neurological pathways. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself in response to experience, plays a crucial role here. Each time we engage in a certain behavior, whether it's clinging to a desire, obsessing over a goal, or holding on to a fear, we create neural pathways that strengthen those behaviors over time. Our brain builds habits around attachment, and those habits become increasingly ingrained. When we experience something we desire, the brain releases dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with reward and pleasure. This is the brain's way of reinforcing behaviors that it perceives as beneficial to survival or happiness. But in the case of attachment, this dopamine release creates a cycle of dependency. The brain becomes addicted to the high it gets from achieving goals or acquiring possessions, and in doing so, it reinforces the belief that happiness can be found outside of oneself, in the acquisition of things or the attainment of desires. This cycle is not just a psychological phenomenon, it's neurological. Every time you experience pleasure from an attachment, your brain reinforces the behavior, making it harder to break free. The more you hold on to something, the stronger the neurological pathways of attachment become, locking you into a feedback loop that keeps you craving more. But here's the paradox: the more you crave, the more you entrench yourself in suffering. The very attachment that brings you temporary pleasure creates the conditions for greater pain later on. And this is the dark side of attachment. The expectation of happiness from external sources creates a subtle form of dependency that, when not met, leads to frustration, anxiety, and dissatisfaction. Cultural conditioning plays a massive role here as well. From the moment you're born, society bombards you with messages about what you need to be happy, what you need to succeed, and what you need to be loved. You are taught to chase success, to accumulate wealth, to cultivate relationships that reflect your worth. All of these attachments are externalized, shaping your identity and defining your sense of fulfillment. What if you were raised in a world that didn't teach attachment as a way to happiness? Imagine a society that valued freedom from desire, that promoted inner peace and self-knowledge over external success. The conditioning that drives our attachment would be radically different. But in the world we live in, detachment is not the norm. Detachment is seen as a radical, even rebellious act. The question becomes, how can we break free from this deeply ingrained system? How can we learn to detach when every part of us, from our neural pathways to our cultural values, keeps pushing us to hold on? To understand this, we must first acknowledge that detachment is not about renouncing the world, it's about transcending the mind's need to hold on. Detachment is a shift from external validation to internal peace. It's about reclaiming control over the only thing you can truly control, your mind. When we detach, we're not rejecting the world or abandoning relationships. We're simply removing the emotional and psychological weight that these attachments impose. It's about recognizing that nothing outside of you can ever provide lasting fulfillment. The true source of peace lies within. But how do you even begin? How do you rewire the brain that has been conditioned to attach and crave? How do you break free from the cultural programming that tells you that success and happiness lie in acquiring, holding on, and keeping control? These questions lead us toward the next phase of this journey, the rebellion against attachment. It is in this rebellion that the greatest transformation occurs, the realization that freedom comes not through acquiring more, but by learning the art of letting go. The weight of all that we've explored now pushes us toward a radical shift. The psychological traps, the cognitive and neurological wiring, how can we escape them? How can we truly break free from the chains of attachment and reclaim our power? Let's now dive into the rebellion, the radical shift in perspective that challenges everything we think we know. What if everything you've been taught about life, about success, happiness, and meaning, was wrong? What if you didn't need to chase after validation, success, or wealth to feel complete? What if, instead, the key to true freedom and power was in letting go of everything? It sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? To let go of everything that society tells you to hold on to, your career, your possessions, your relationships, your desires. But here's the radical truth, the very act of letting go is what gives you true freedom. It's in the surrender, the release of attachment, that you gain control over your own life. The key to breaking free from the endless cycle of craving and suffering is not in accumulating more or holding on tighter, but in unlearning what you've been conditioned to believe. The first step in this rebellion is understanding that attachment is the root of suffering, not the world itself. The more you cling, the more you are bound to the whims of an ever-changing reality. And the more you hold on to things, people, or expectations, the more you are at their mercy. But imagine, for a moment, how it would feel to no longer be at the mercy of anything. Imagine being so detached that no matter what happens in your life, whether you lose your job, face betrayal, or encounter failure, you remain unmoved, centered, and at peace. This is the power of detachment. The rebellion is about shifting your mindset. It's about moving away from a world defined by external goals and possessions and embracing an internal world of peace, equanimity, and freedom. But how do you make that shift? How do you stop identifying with the things that have, until now, defined you? Let's begin by dispelling a common misconception. Detachment does not mean renouncing life, shutting yourself off from relationships, or giving up on your dreams. It doesn't mean living in isolation, devoid of love or ambition. Detachment is not about denying life. It's about engaging with it fully, without being emotionally ensnared by it. It's about participating in life without clinging to it, without allowing it to define your sense of self. Take, for example, the legendary artist Pablo Picasso. Picasso is known for his passion for creation, his endless drive to evolve and experiment with different styles. But what's often overlooked is how he approached his work. He was deeply detached from it. Picasso would often destroy his own paintings when he felt they no longer served his purpose or when they became too attached to a past version of himself. his detachment from the outcome of his work allowed him to move forward, constantly reinventing himself without being held hostage by his own creations. He showed the world that true creativity, true freedom, comes from the ability to let go, to release your grip on your past and on your expectations of success. Similarly, in the Zen tradition, we learn to embrace the moment without attachment to any particular outcome. Zen masters teach that true wisdom arises when you stop grasping at anything. In Zen, the act of letting go, of non-attachment, allows you to experience life directly, without the filters of desire, judgment, or attachment. It's the difference between looking at life through a screen of preconceived notions and expectations and simply seeing it as it is, raw, unfiltered, and beautiful. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring, it means you stop clinging. It means you engage with life fully, without the fear of loss or the desperation for control. You are free to experience things as they come, but you are not owned by them. The second step in this rebellion is a profound shift in identity. For most people, their sense of self is defined by what they have, whether it's their job, their family, their possessions, or their social status. But the truth is, these things are not you. They are external, temporary, and constantly shifting. Imagine how it would feel to stop identifying with your job, your wealth, or even your relationships. What if your identity wasn't tied to anything outside of you? What if you defined yourself not by what you have, but by who you are, by your character, your inner peace, your ability to love, to be present, and to experience life as it is, without the need to possess or control? In the story of Siddhartha Gautama, the man who became the Buddha, we see the ultimate shift in identity. Siddhartha had everything a person could want: wealth, power, and prestige. But these things never gave him peace. It was only when he let go of them all, when he abandoned his identity as a prince, that he discovered his true self. By renouncing external markers of success and power, he was able to reconnect with his essence and discover the peace that comes from within. The same can be true for you. By letting go of the need to define yourself through external achievements and possessions, you can discover a new sense of freedom. This is the essence of detachment. It's the ability to let go of old identities and embrace the deeper truth of who you are, beyond the surface-level attachments. Another critical element of breaking free from attachment is the ability to embrace impermanence. Everything in life is in constant flux, people change, circumstances shift, and nothing remains the same forever. The more you try to hold on to things, the more you fight against the natural flow of life. The Taoist concept of Wu Wei, or effortless action, encourages us to align with the natural flow of life. Instead of fighting against the current, we learn to move with it. We let go of our need to control and instead allow life to unfold as it will. This doesn't mean being passive or apathetic, it means engaging with life in a way that is open, flexible, and free of resistance. The key here is acceptance. By accepting that all things are temporary, that everything is constantly changing, you are no longer attached to any particular outcome. You let go of the need to control or hold on to anything, and you simply allow life to unfold. This brings about a profound sense of peace and freedom because you are no longer fighting against the inevitable. So, how do you begin this rebellion? How do you start to break free from the chains of attachment? The first step is to start small. Begin by observing your attachments, whether to people, possessions, or even ideas. Notice how much emotional energy you give to these attachments. Begin to practice detachment in small, everyday situations. Let go of the need to control every detail of your life. Allow things to happen without trying to force them into a particular outcome. Let go of the need for approval or validation from others. Gradually, you will begin to notice a shift in your thinking. Over time, as you practice detachment in smaller ways, it will become easier to apply it to larger aspects of your life. The process is gradual, but it is incredibly powerful. The rebellion against attachment is not an easy one. It requires deep introspection, a willingness to challenge everything you've ever been taught, and the courage to let go of what no longer serves you. But it is in this very rebellion that you reclaim your power. Once you learn to detach, once you release the need to control, to possess, to identify with external things, you begin to live a life of true freedom. And when you do, you will discover that everything you ever sought, everything you ever desired, was always within you. You were just too attached to see it. Let go. And in that letting go, you will find life waiting for you, open, expansive, and limitless. Now that we've seen the rebellious path to freedom through detachment, it's time to explore the ultimate truth. What is the final, most powerful realization that will change the way you experience the world forever? It's time to uncover that truth. Imagine you've spent your entire life chasing things, goals, possessions, approval, and recognition. You've believed, deeply and fervently, that these things were what would bring you peace. But now, through the rebellion against attachment, you've come to see how fragile all of that is. You've begun to release your grip on the external world, and for the first time, a strange sense of stillness begins to settle in. What if I told you that in this stillness lies the most profound truth of all? What if I told you that the very thing you've been seeking in the external world was never out there at all, but had been within you all along? The ultimate realization, the one that will forever transform your understanding of life, is this: you are already whole. You have always been whole. That's it. It's as simple, and as terrifying, as that. All of the external pursuits you've chased were built on the false assumption that something was missing inside you. You've been trying to fill a void, but the void was never real. It was an illusion, one that attachment fed, one that attachment created. Think about it. You've attached yourself to achievements, to relationships, to the need to be loved, respected, and admired. All of these attachments have been built on the idea that there is something outside of you that you lack, that without these things, you are incomplete. But detachment, when truly understood, reveals the truth: you are complete, just as you are. Let that sink in. When you let go of attachment, you stop chasing the external. You stop trying to fill a non-existent void. You begin to realize that every pursuit, every attachment, every desire you've had was merely a distraction from the truth of your wholeness. This truth, the truth of your inherent completeness, has profound implications for how you live your life. Once you realize that you are already whole, the need to chase after things to prove your worth falls away. The desperate scramble for validation, the desire to constantly accumulate and achieve, evaporates. And in that emptiness, you discover peace. You discover freedom. But here's where it gets even more powerful. This realization is not just a mental understanding, it's an experiential truth. When you let go of attachment and begin to live from a place of wholeness, you start to see the world differently. You stop seeking in others or in possessions what you already have within yourself. Instead of looking for happiness in fleeting external circumstances, you begin to access a deeper well of peace, joy, and contentment, one that is not contingent on anything outside of you. This doesn't mean you stop living. It doesn't mean you stop loving, striving, or creating. On the contrary, it means that your actions are no longer driven by the need for validation or external success. You live because you want to, not because you have to. You love because it's a natural extension of your being, not because you need someone else to validate your worth. You strive not for recognition, but for the joy of growth and self-expression. In Buddhism, there is a concept called emptiness, shunyata, which is closely related to the realization of wholeness. Emptiness, in this sense, doesn't mean a void or lack, it means freedom from fixed concepts and attachments. To see the world through the lens of emptiness is to realize that nothing is permanent, nothing is fixed, and nothing can truly define you. When you understand emptiness, you free yourself from the need to cling to anything. You become spacious within, open to life as it is, without needing it to be anything else. The idea of emptiness might sound unsettling at first. We are conditioned to think that fullness comes from attachment, from accumulation, from getting more. But the ultimate truth is that true fullness comes from releasing. When you stop clinging, when you let go of the need for external validation and desires, you make space within yourself. And that space is where peace resides. That space is where you meet your authentic self. Now, let's circle back to the question of why detachment is so powerful. It's because detachment doesn't just free you from external attachments, it liberates you from the idea of lack. You stop living in the constant search for something more, for something that will complete you. Instead, you live from a place of wholeness, from a recognition that you are complete in the present moment. This is the most profound shift you can make in your life. This realization of wholeness is also the root of your true power. When you realize that nothing outside of you can truly complete you, you stop being controlled by fear, by insecurity, by the desire for external success. You no longer need to conform to society's expectations of what you should have or who you should be. You are free to live authentically, unapologetically, and with purpose. In the Stoic philosophy, there is a concept called the dichotomy of control, which is remarkably similar to the power of detachment. The Stoics teach that we cannot control the external world, but we can control our response to it. When you detach from the need to control, possess, or change the world around you, you free yourself from the tyranny of external circumstances. You no longer define your peace based on what happens to you, you define it by how you choose to respond to the world. What happens when you make that shift? When you stop defining yourself by external circumstances and start living from the truth of your own wholeness, you step into a new level of freedom. You embrace a life where every moment is an opportunity for joy, not because of anything you possess, but because of who you are in that moment. This is the ultimate truth: you are already complete. Once you realize this, the world becomes a different place. The struggle to attain, to possess, to achieve, all of that fades away. You are no longer living for the next thing, the next acquisition, the next approval. You are living in alignment with the truth of your being, and in that alignment, you experience peace, fulfillment, and freedom that no external force can ever take away. At the end of this journey, you may be wondering, what does all of this mean for your life, today? What does it look like to live from a place of detachment, from the realization of your own wholeness? It means that you no longer chase after things. It means that you can love deeply, but without fear. It means that your happiness is no longer dependent on the fleeting, on the external. You will still experience the joys of life, but now, you do so from a place of inner peace, not from a place of desperation or need. When you embrace detachment, you step into the ultimate truth of who you are. You realize that life is not something you need to control or possess, it is something to be experienced, lived, and loved in its purest, most liberated form. Now, ask yourself, what would your life look like if you lived with that truth in mind every day? What would it feel like to release the constant search for something more, and instead be at peace with the way things are, right here and right now? In this realization lies the true mastery of life. You are no longer bound by anything, neither by fear, desire, nor attachment. You are free. And that freedom is the most powerful force you will ever experience.